But I do think one of the things that polyamory has given me and this journey has given me is a lot of tools for communication that can actually make that ending either better or less inevitable, because you have different ways of, de-escalating a relationship that isn't working in a certain context or in a certain way, de-escalating it or evolving it into a different form of a relationship or connection that does feel more mutually healthy for everyone.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 212. We're Finn and Emma, and it's a Monday! Special bonus Monday episode, which we're excited about. Can you tell?
I can tell. It's electric in here.
So exciting. Today, we have an awesome interview with Luna. She shares her journey exploring non-monogamy with us and how it has inspired her to start an amazing new community-based app.
Yeah, the app is called Bloom, or Bloom Community, and it is a consent-forward, sex-positive, social, and dating community app. And it's pretty awesome. We've been on there for the last month or so. Our virtual meet and greets, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, are listed on there, and we've met some really great people. And actually, some of them have joined our Patreon community after finding us through Bloom and through Luna's app. So
yeah, how awesome is that?
I think it's awesome.
It's amazing.
And it's a great app, and just really love the work that they're doing. And we're excited to help them spread the word and help them grow, help the sex-positive community grow. So thank you to Luna and everyone at the team over at Bloom for the work you're doing. We greatly appreciate it. And one final quick thing on that, we like to just be transparent about who is paying us to talk about their stuff and who is not. Bloom and Luna are not paying us in any way, shape, or form to promote this. This is something that they reached out to us with. We've been checking it out for the last month or two, really loving what they're doing, and just want to help spread the word. So we like to be transparent about that. And now I will stop talking and hand it over to Emma.
And after you finish this episode, go check out Bloom.
Yes, because, you can find people who are signed up for our virtual meet and greets.
Yes. Exactly.
Well, might as well talk about our virtual meet and greets.
Sure. So that perfectly. We're going to do a couple of announcements.
They call that a segue. In the biz.
And I ruined the segue.
Well, I wasn't good. I didn't. Hold on. I did not say that.
Anyway, virtual meet and greets. We have two upcoming virtual meet and greets. One is this week. It's this Thursday night, December 9th. That's from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern time. We have another one coming up on December 17th. That's a Friday, also from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern time. And our virtual meet and greets are, just come join us. Super fun. They're open to anyone. All you need to do is be open-minded and non-judgmental.
And sex-positive and consent-forward.
All of those things.
Consent-focused.
Yes.
So if you want to sign up for the meet and greets, head over to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the Community Events tab, and you will see a link there to do so. After you sign up, head over, download the Bloom app.
Yes.
And you will see other people who are already signed up. You can chat with them ahead of time, get to know them, and build a little pre-community community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super pumped. And if you happen to miss the ones in December, we'll have more virtual meet and greets in January. So don't worry.
Yes. And if maybe the virtual meet and greets aren't your jam, or you heard us mention Patreon earlier and you got all excited and you're like, ooh, great, another podcast talking about Patreon. We'll keep it very short. Ours is 100% community focused. We've grown to almost 200 members. It's awesome. So a huge thank you to everyone who's a part of that community. We do monthly virtual Q&As. We have a men's call and a women's call, and we do an online MeWe chat group as well. So everybody can stay in touch, get to know each other, and support each other throughout the entire month and year.
Yeah.
And however long you want to stick around and check it out. So
to check it out, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the Patreon button. All of the information is there.
And thank you in advance for your support of the show. and for helping us build an awesome community.
Yeah, it's amazing. We love this community so much. The other thing we wanted to mention is we do have some in-person meet and greets coming up that we're working on planning. The only one that we've officially announced is New Orleans on February 7th, but more will be coming soon. Go to our website and sign up for our mailing list to be the first to be notified when we announce those.
Yes, and with that, I think we'll head over and talk to Luna. But first, we wanted to just remind you, if you have any feedback for us or if you'd like to reach out to us for any reason, head over to our website, click on the Contact Us tab, send us an email, send us a voicemail. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to have you come on the show, and we'd love to get to know you.
Yep.
And we will also just say that Luna will do a much better job of describing Bloom than we did. So stay tuned towards the end of the interview for that. And again, we hope you check out the app. It's fantastic.
And now let's go talk to Luna. Well, welcome, Luna, to the show. We're so excited that you're here tonight, and we're excited to talk to you. I know that we know a little bit about you, but not much, and the listeners don't know anything. So we'd love if you could start by introducing yourself.
Sure. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Luna Ray. I'm 31. I live in the Bay Area. I identify as polyamorous, queer, kinky. I'm also the founder of Bloom Community, which is a sex-positive social and dating app where you can meet people at events.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I have been, not to say Emma hasn't or won't, I've been spending some time on Bloom, so I'm excited to talk more about it later. It's awesome. I'm just going to throw that out up front. But
it's okay. I know you've been on there more than I have.
I know we got to split up the tasks.
Yeah.
We can't do it all.
Yeah.
So I guess what does non-monogamy look like maybe for you today? And maybe take us back to like, when did you get started? How did you get started?
Yeah, I'll start with the getting started and then bring it to the today. So
Perfect.
I just really first got curious and started reading some books about non-monogamy, or early days when I had sort of started to hear about it. I made a couple of friends through Burning Man in the kink community who were very open about their relationships. And at the time I was looking for models of healthy, open relationships, healthy non-monogamous relationships, because I knew some folks who didn't have necessarily healthy ones, who had don't ask, don't tell policies, or lack of communication around what's okay until after it happens. And I really didn't want to be, following in those footsteps. I was really looking for models that were much healthier. And these friends in the Burning Man kink communities really just helped me understand, sort of ways of being and doing, according to the polyamorous model of open relationships. And that's where I started kind of walking down. So I ended up finding this poly women's happy hour on Facebook, and I thought it was going to be a support group for polyamorous women. And it was in the Mission in San Francisco, and I just went. And when I got there, I learned that it was actually the pre-drinks for a play party run by an organization that no longer exists called Organ House. Organ House was a young non-monogamous organization in the Bay Area up until COVID. And the women that were at this event, women and non-binary people, were really, really cool, attractive, confident. They really seemed like they had their shit figured out when it comes to open relationships and non-monogamy. And I was like, I want to be in this club. At some point, everyone sort of dives down the rabbit hole, and that was my headfirst dive, just getting involved in Organ House. So
yeah. So I have a follow-up on that, which is, and you don't have to disclose this if you don't want to. Were you brave enough that night to go from the pre-drink party to the post-drink party?
That's a funny question. The pre-drink party was actually, it was a couple of days before the event.
Okay.
And I think I was out of town that weekend. The event that it was a pre-drinks for, by the way, was called Girl G. Getting renamed to be more gender, or it was about to be renamed to be more gender inclusive, but then they never had another one. But the spirit of it was that it was like a femme-leaning, non-binary and women's event.
Yeah.
Awesome. And before we jump forward a little bit and continue your journey, I'm curious too, growing up, did you have any influences around models of non-monogamous relationships other than what you said, like the ones you knew were not great?
Well, and just sorry to jump on that, but what you saw ones that weren't great, what about that drew you in to be like, well, this is intriguing enough to look for better models of it?
Yeah. So I live in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of like jokes on TV these days that like everyone's poly, and that's not really not true. But there's a lot of open relationships and people sort of experimenting with different forms of open relationships here, and there has been for a decade or more. In a large like for many decades in a small subset of the population, and probably a decade at this point for a pretty large subset of the population, and so. I just knew like everyone had like experimented with it almost in some form, and I was kind of interested in my own experimentation, so to speak. But I also was aware of the fact that people who were in partnered relationships and started going down a path of exploration without having good communication tools in place and good expectations set seem to get themselves into trouble in their like pre-existing relationships or relationship. And so I really wanted to just have see a version of it that didn't look like a shit show.
Right.
So frankly.
Yeah. And sorry, I jumped over Emma's question about.
Well, she kind of answered it already.
Okay. Yeah, I guess growing up in the Bay Area was sort of not okay. My apologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like it's just a different part of the country than a lot of the rest of the country, and so it's maybe more a little more commonplace, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what's like fast forwarding all the way to today? What does your non-monogamy world look like?
Yeah, I currently have one partner, and I have had a couple of other partners over the years. I have a few what I call sexy friends, really, because there's no good term for this. But these are people whom I have a wonderful friendship with, who I also sometimes have a sexual or romantic relationship with. And in monogamous culture, people might call that a fuck buddy. I think the emphasis for me is really on the friendship. Like these are multi-year connections that show up more like friends than partners in my life. But there's also a really lovely, healthy, mutual, consensual sexual connection with.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. I like that too. The shift away from fuck buddy is a little, first it's a little harsh, but then it really put the emphasis on, this is a friendship.
Friends with benefits
an
in a way.
Amorphous friendship.
Yeah, and I think friends with benefits also I think trivializes the friendship a bit.
I agree.
But, whereas these people for me are first and foremost friends that I have had for over the last couple of years and hope to have as friends for many years into the future, regardless of whether that sexual relationship or romantic connection continues. But who I really value as friends in my life. But again, like they show up more like friends than partners, where there are certain expectations for friends in your life and certain expectations that people tend to have for partners. And they fall more in that like friend place from a commitment and communication standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So going back to, I'm trying to remember the name of what you called it, girl orgy. Girl G. Terrible name. But it's funny too. Going back from that experience, what does your journey look like from there?
From there, it was really just making more and more friends in the sex positive community out here in the Bay Area, which has a lot of overlap with polyamorous community, and just getting tied into more events where I had opportunities to meet more people, learn from different people who had different forms of relationships. I think it's been really interesting to see how diverse relationship structures can be. And every time, I think I've seen it all, like something else comes up, because I think, for as many ways as humans can exist in a lot of different configurations of relationships, there's just so many different possibilities. So that's, now today I have a lot of friends in what we call sex positive community, and, a lot of different people with like different degrees and types of connections.
Yeah. And through that couple of years that you've been looking at this a little closer and moving through this journey, like, has the way that you've approached it, like, changed and morphed? Like day one, it was like this, and like, you're like, whoa, day two, day one didn't work very well. Like we need to change it up a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think day one was very naive, as everyone who enters into this world, early on, you've got ideas of like sexy threesomes or whatever. And the reality is that when you start to open yourself up to the possibility of true like romantic relationships, things are actually a lot more complicated. And even threesomes are more complicated than you'd think they would be. But, I think there's been a lot of lessons along the way. I think, if you aren't interested in a lot of personal growth, I wouldn't recommend trying to be ethically non-monogamous. I think, the folks that I am in community with out here, spend a lot of time really examining their emotions, like learning new ways of communication, like nonviolent communication, really looking into your darkest shadows and asking, like, why are these things coming up for me? Because, non-monogamy and some of the challenges that comes with it really just bring up things that already exist for you. But sometimes they come up in really like scary and surprising ways. And then, like, some of the other things that I feel like I've learned are just some of the nomenclature that exists within the poly community out here. I say out here, I'm sure it exists in other poly communities and in other places. I just don't know what those poly communities, how they live and exist, because I don't know them. But, like, people talking about boundaries, not rules, boundaries being things that I place on me. Yep. Rules being things that I place on you. And so, learning to communicate with partners and in relationships about, hey, this is my personal boundary. I'm not going to engage in this way. Like, you can do X, Y, Z, like, you do you, but then this is how I will respond. Not, oh, you can't do X, Y, Z. Where, right. That, because that would be a rule. And so, like, thinking about it in the, like, I have influence over my life and my choices, and my partner is like an independent being.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I've really been overjoyed to learn is, like, a very different model of consent than what I was brought up with. I think broadly in society, the narrative is shifting a little bit from one that's a much more of a model of, like, no means no, where, the responsibility is on the person escalating to, today's model is the responsibility is on the person escalating to check in for an affirmative yes, rather than expecting the person who is being escalated on to say no. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that's a really good thing. It's certainly been very empowering for me to have, sexual connections where that is the norm going in, rather than the other way around in sort of like the old model of consent. Yeah, so that's a lot of answers there, but I think there's a lot of things that really have changed for me.
Yeah, that's a huge one on the consent, right? The difference between, like, well, hey, you didn't say no, to, like, I was checking in and, like, you said yes, you said yes, you said yes. And maybe this one you hesitated a little bit. And even that's enough to be like, that's not a yes anymore, right?
Yeah. And I'm very fortunate to be connected to the community that runs the Orgy Dome at Burning Man. And they've pioneered sort of a consent talk that they give to about 7,000 people every year that come through the Orgy Dome. And it really emphasizes that, the yes is a very sexy word, that affirmative yes is a very sexy word, as is a no, because then you know where that person's boundaries are, and you know what's safe, and you know what they're really here for. And celebrating that yes and celebrating the no, like, both of them are actually really good things. So.
Yeah, that's huge. I think as you were saying that, I was like, well, what about the no? And then you said, and the no is also sexy. I was like, okay, good. We're on the same page. So I love that.
Giving the space, the person the space to say whatever, either one.
Inviting it.
And inviting that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have seen yourself grow a lot of different ways, and that that if you're going to be exploring non-monogamy, you kind of need to sign up for growth. And I couldn't agree more with that. I feel like people who non-monogamy is not right for you if you don't want to grow and push yourself, because
it's going to be painful.
It's going to be painful if you don't. But I'm curious for you, like, what are some of the ways you've seen yourself grow?
I think about the world totally differently. I definitely apply a lot of my own learnings, in this journey to the world that I inhabit. Everything from thinking about affirmative consent and boundaries in all aspects of life, like not just sexual, in terms of how you engage with other people, to nonviolent communication, which is a tool that a lot of people practice in the context of their non-monogamous relationships here, but that's also very relevant just in having a conversation with friends or coworkers, to understanding the impact of attachment styles and how they affect all types of relationships, not, just romantic ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned nonviolent communication. I'm just going to pick at that a little bit, because Finn and I are familiar with it. We haven't had many people talk about it on the show. Yeah. And it's something, if you're comfortable with, I'd love for you to dig in a little bit. And what does nonviolent communication mean to you, and what have you learned about it?
So there is a book called, I think, Nonviolent Communication.
Yes. Links
What?
will be in the show notes.
Yeah, that I'd recommend people read. I think, there's sort of like a base level of like, hey, if you're going to do this thing and want to do it well, like these are the books I'd recommend you read. And I would say Nonviolent Communication is probably one of those. It's been a while since I've read it. The basic idea is that you're taking responsibility for your emotions in the course of the conversation. And so when you're having, a conversation with someone, particularly a conversation that's challenging, thinking about how you phrase what you're saying. So it's like, it's both say, I hear you saying this. The impact that what you are saying is having on me is this. And then and framing it more, not like, oh, well, you hurt me, and like the responsibility in that one being on you. It's like, oh, well, the words you said, like, this is what they meant to me. This is like how I heard it. And this was my reaction. And so like really, taking a step back from framing it in a combative light and putting it more in an understanding and a curiosity light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually a terrible explanation of nonviolent communication. So I'd recommend people reading
the book. Reading the book. Exactly. Perfect. No, and so we're kind of like, I feel like a ping pong ball. We're all kind of all over the place here, but it's all right. I was curious, like we grew up in a place where, let's call it the opposite of the Bay Area. If there were such a place. And so like, we didn't have any models of this around us growing up, at least not that we knew of. And so like, there's a challenge there of like, we don't have any models. Mm-hmm. I feel like on the flip side, if it's all around you and it's sort of ubiquitous, that you're like, I don't know, I feel like in a sense, that could almost be overwhelming, that like, there's this way and this way and this way. And like, I'm never going to catch up to all these people who are like so amazing at communication and all of the different things you need to do. Like how was that for you? Like being sort of embedded in like the like ground zero for it, so to speak.
So I grew up in upstate New York, so there wasn't any of this where I grew up either. This is a total shift for me as well. And actually, it's actually the case for a lot of folks in the sex positive, polyamorous, and kink communities out here. A lot of queer communities as well are not necessarily from the Bay Area and have just found their home out here. And so part of it's also building family along with that. I think that what it's like to be in it. It's really wonderful to have partners who have also read some of these books. It's really wonderful to have, to be having conversations about consent, not in like the, oh, we should be like in a very positive way. That's like, hey, this is really important. And also how do we share this with other people in other places? It's lovely to be able to, talk about, oh, this is this thing that I'm working on. I'm reading this book and this is my insight from it. And then to be able to have those conversations with, people who are out here. There's a lot of folks who I think nerd out about relationships and communication. I'm definitely one of them. There's a friend of mine, Misha Bonaventura, who runs Bonobo Network, has led a book club on polysecure. I think she's read the book 5 times and led the book club, like at least a few at this point, for just different chapters or different groups coming through Bonobo Network, just because she's so personally passionate about that book and it's been so helpful for her. And I think there's just like a really awesome desire to help people like level up their skills in a sense. Like, not that there's actually levels because we're all like learning as we go, but there's I feel like I'm, understand this thing really well. So people will just host support groups and lots of different ways to kind of learn and process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And funny fact, we, I know it's not going to be in the right order, but we did happen to interview Misha yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'm not sure if which one of your interviews will be out first, but they're going to be close together. And
spoiler alert.
I know, I spoiled it, but, she did mention the polysecure and how she's read it 5 times. So you had it all right. We heard that directly from her yesterday.
That's amazing. Yeah.
We're fact checking her.
Right.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. She's fantastic.
Yeah. No, it it is a fantastic book. And I would just say for anybody who hasn't read it, I would recommend reading it. I tried listening to it
We
on
both
audiobook,
did. Yeah.
and what I found was I would just drift off thinking about how applicable what I was listening to was like to what I'm dealing with or what's going on. And then I'd miss something and I'm like, wow, now I got to back it up. But like, if you're reading, like you can just stop and think about it or, so that'd be my recommendation, is to read it, not listen to it.
It's not a very long book. And I do think most of the time in that process is just the like, oh, wow. Oh, that's what was happening there. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and that sort of leads into something I was curious about. Like, there's been a few years that you've been delving into non-monogamy, like relationships you had before, let's say the Enlightenment, if we're going to be as humble about it, like, how would you maybe like contrast like who Luna was in those relationships and how those relationships went versus like how you approach them today?
Interesting. I think there's just challenges that come up with non-monogamy that don't exist in the same extent in monogamy. Because when your partner has other partners, there's going to be like insecurities that surface that probably wouldn't have surfaced if it was a monogamous relationship. The fear of loss, the fear of rejection, the fear of loneliness, of abandonment, like all of those things come up in a way. It's your partner can always leave you whether you're monogamous or not. That's the reality is there, but there's certainly a different visceral reaction when you see your partner with someone else who they really care about. And so I do think that early days me on this journey was like very reactive to that. And very, in attachment theory, you would call that anxious, and kind of me along the journey is more like, okay, yeah. And, that's great that they have another partner, and like to just be more accepting of that, to do less of the things that feed into that anxious attachment style and just being, more aware of it in myself, and how it shows up, and, putting brakes on relationships, intentionally where that anxious thing is coming up for me personally. My attachment style tends to lean anxious, so that I can get to a more secure place without kind of, going off the rails or suffering too much from like the self-imposed anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is like in monogamy, like it's easy to be like, oh, well, these feelings are more pervasive if you're in a non-monogamous relationship. I think what happens a lot of times, that fear is so ingrained in all of us that a monogamy is a way to be like, well, I don't have to think about that anymore. Like, we're married. My partner won't leave me because we're married. They won't be interested in somebody else. We're married. And then when you really look at it, you're like, no, those things still happen. Like, it's not like they just forget about it. But I think it's easy to be like, I don't want to deal with that fear. So we'll just lock this in, close it up, and pretend that no one here will ever be interested in anybody else.
Yeah. And I've been through, really close friendships that have gone through divorces or separations of very serious relationships that were monogamous. And, the lesson in that for me was, well, these things do end sometimes. Nobody ever really wants them to. You certainly don't want it to happen when you're getting married, right? Or even moving in together, or at any point in time, you're not looking for that thing to end. But I do think one of the things that polyamory has given me and this journey has given me is a lot of tools for communication that can actually make that ending either better or less inevitable, because you have different ways of, de-escalating a relationship that isn't working in a certain context or in a certain way, de-escalating it or evolving it into a different form of a relationship or connection that does feel more mutually healthy for everyone. And unfortunately, in a monogamous context, if two people get married and they move in together and, suddenly they realize that they actually hate living with each other, but they still love each other, there's not good models of like, oh, well, now we're just going to live in separate homes, but still remain married. Like, that's totally socially unacceptable. And in polyamory, that's like totally fine.
Right.
So, and there's like words to describe, the two talking about that. There's de-escalation, there's evolving the relationship, there's all these things and concepts that these things can be acceptable because a relationship can take different forms than the traditional escalator, move in, marriage, kids, death. I don't know.
I think usually it's move in, marriage, kids, and then in your 40s,
house.
Start looking at swinging, and then
Right.
that's what we tend to see happening. Everyone's like, well, now that the kids are out, let's think about this a little bit differently. But I think there's a lot of people just falling under the we're in an open relationship, or I'm ethically non-monogamous, and then that's the conversation started. Well, what does that look like for you? Rather than I'm a swinger, I'm poly, I'm an open relation, or I'm non-monogamous, and let's talk about it.
And I think it's interesting because it's you can say you're ethically non-monogamous, and you're right, it is the start of the conversation. And then the next part of the conversation is not just what are you open to, but what is that other person open to? If you're starting to have a conversation about a connection, the words become really challenging because now it's not just what is my identity? It's what is my identity in relation to you too? Or what is the way that we're going to define the space that we're kind of going to play in romantically together? Yeah.
And I think, and maybe I'm curious, on your experience with that, when you tell somebody, and this is a thing that we've always a little bit been afraid of when we tell people who we haven't told in the past, hey, friends that have known us for 20 years, we're in an open relationship, we're non-monogamous. The fear is you're hitting on them, or because I'm telling you, I'm only telling you for a reason rather than we're just talking. And so when you're in that space and you start talking to somebody, there's this expectation oh, you're talking to me, I'm talking to you, we're both non-monogamous. Hey, I guess this is just going to happen now. And that's not necessarily how it works.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think it's also a little bit culturally, I think, differences maybe between where I am and where you are. If I were to go to a non-monogamous person in the Bay Area and be I'm non-monogamous, and they would be me too, there definitely wouldn't be an expectation that now we're going to have sex, because then they're just everyone, right? So
orgies on the streets all over San Francisco. That's all that would be happening.
I mean, it's not terribly untrue, but it's not totally true either. I think the other thing that the consent model that's cultivated out here and is still evolving is talking about is the fact that there shouldn't be expectations in any engagement, right? There shouldn't, whenever you're talking to someone, whenever you go to a sex party, you shouldn't expect to have sex. Nobody's entitled to that. When you're having a conversation with a non-monogamous person, you shouldn't expect that they're also open to sleeping with you just because they're non-monogamous. That's ridiculous. A monogamous person goes on a date with someone, they shouldn't expect to get laid that night. That's also ridiculous. It's really about what are the things that we're both open to? What are the things that we're both mutually excited about? And, again, doing that together because with the mutual excitement of all involved.
Yeah. I love it. And I think maybe it's a good place to sort of lead into
safety.
Safety, but I think safety is really tied into what you're building at Bloom, and what your what was your motivation for founding Bloom, getting it started, and maybe starting with what is it, so people kind of have an idea of what the hell we're talking about. But
so Bloom is a sex positive community that meets up at events. We are right now live in the Bay Area, launching really today, actually in LA. So it's currently middle of November. So whenever this airs, we'll be fully live in LA.
Congratulations, by the way. That's super exciting.
Yeah, right.
And really, even though we're live in those two cities, what that really means is that those are where we are actively working and partnering with event organizers in those cities, where we are also accessible around the country. And we have members in almost every single state at this point who are using Bloom to meet other sex positive people. And obviously we're working together on your virtual events. And so what we're trying to do as well is bring in a handful of virtual events to help people find community, all around the country. People who are looking for sex positive, kinky, poly, ethically non-monogamous, queer, et cetera, people. So, what are we fundamentally? We're really just a group of people who believe that consent is really important. Who believe that communicating your desires and your yeses and your nos is really important, and that respecting people is really important. So we actually have 3 community values. We have an app that supports all of those connections and holds people kind of to that standard of accountability. And then we partner with event organizers to make it really easy to meet those people. So event organizers will add their events into Bloom. They will tell their community about Bloom, and then those people can come in, they can match in the app. And so it's a mutual opt-in, consent-based connection to chat one-on-one. And there's also a community chat that happens for every event as well. So it's a very long explanation, but yeah, TLDR, we are a sex-positive community that meets up at events.
Yeah.
So.
And I think maybe somebody listening says, well, that sounds like Meetup, like meetup.com, right? Like, it's definitely, there's a lot of differences there, but what do you feel like, is that your like if somebody was like, I'm trying to like visualize this, is that the closest thing to what you think? And like, maybe what sets you apart from your nearest kind of competitor, your nearest,
similar app?
Yeah.
Depending on what lens you're looking at it as, like, so you could call us Tinder for events.
Okay.
Where you have that option to come in and match with people before events. We can be a replacement for Facebook events if your community is still using Facebook. We are a replacement for Meetup as well. The core distinction really is that we lead with sex-positive values, and we aim to build a community around those values. Mm-hmm. And so it's the main distinction actually is that the people you're going to meet on Bloom all share these values.
Right.
And there's nowhere else that you can really go where that's true. A little bit FetLife, but FetLife is very kink-centric. We are kinky inclusive, but, I would say centered more broadly around sex-positive values.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And like, it's a big difference. Like, and when you go and look at all the different events that are going on, it's very focused on sex positivity, a lot of non-monogamy stuff, a lot of LGBTQ.
Yeah, we do have a lot of events that are I would say in the realm of like sex positive or sexy events. Mm-hmm. We also have a lot of events that are just for sex positive community that aren't in any way, shape, or form sexy, or that we have park meetups where you can go and just meet people who are sex positive. We have concerts. We just did a collaboration with Rachel Lark, who's a sex positive musician out here. We'll do festivals. We did a collaboration with Soul Play, which was a like consciousness, heart-centered festival. Yeah. So, a lot of different opportunities to meet people and opportunities to discover like cool events, because I only really put things in Bloom that I think are pretty cool. So.
Well, we're honored. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the motivation for it for you?
I was going to say, where did you get the idea?
So since I had started identifying as polyamorous and queer, I had always met people through community and through community events. And when the pandemic hit and I tried online dating for the first time in my life, I was just horrified. Unsolicited dick pics from people with penises, strange behavior, dehumanizing swiping, like all of these things just never happened when I was dating in community. And I really wanted to meet sex positive people that treated me well. Like that was all I was like really looking for. But that was almost impossible to find on the internet. So, one of the things that I had observed from the communities I had been in was that they have these dual mechanisms of community values and defining those community values, and then community reinforcement of those values. And, the community will also not continue to invite people to events who aren't able to uphold those values. So if you have repeat consent violators, they will, not be allowed to come to events. And in some communities, there'll be a lot of work done to help them, learn. But I really wanted a dating app that actually took on some of that as well, that had those community values, that had the reinforcement of them, because I felt like there was just so much to learn from the communities that put in that work. So that's what we are doing at Bloom.
Yeah. I love it. And I think too, like the accountability, like that's kind of what you outlined there, right? It's community accountability. If you show up into the community space and somebody's being creepy, they're going to be ostracized from the community. And so there's there's a lot of self-policing that happens in there.
Yeah, obviously our top priority is to keep the community safe. Bloom is clearly a woman and queer-led company because I run it. And one of the things that I care a lot about is providing the safest place to meet new partners and friends. And specifically really the safest place through technology, through software, because the safest place would be like in your friend's living room. But right. Short of that, if you're going to be using a dating app or a social app to connect with people, we want to be teaching norms around safety and using the community to keep the rest of the community safe.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, where do you see, obviously, hopefully you want to keep growing, but where do you see Bloom in like 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My obvious hope is that we are an internationally used app by sex positive communities. Now, what's interesting about that is that the term sex positive today is something that's like heavily used in the Bay Area and on the West Coast, and not necessarily used throughout the rest of the country or even throughout the rest of the world, let alone the rest of the world. And I'll actually define what I mean by sex positive. It's a little late, but I've been talking about it a lot. So sex positive is really the lens of looking at and viewing sex as something that is healthy between two consenting adults and normal. And a lot of what comes with that from like a values perspective is really the values of Bloom, that, consent should be affirmatively sought and given, and obviously knows very clearly respected, that communication comes with that respecting of all of that comes with it. So my hope kind of long term is that we have just a giant sex positive community on this app. That means that today, people who don't even necessarily identify as sex positive, but hear these values and think, oh, wow, I actually want to meet people who also have those values, will join Bloom and eventually they'll maybe start to identify as sex positive or learn about it. And so, today, the world of sex positive community or people who would self-identify as that may not be that big, but I actually think that there's a lot of people who want to live in a world in which, consent is a priority in any interaction, and especially in an interaction that's happening, facilitated by technology that may or may not be sexual. I think there's a lot of people that will want that. And so the vision for Bloom is just to continue to invest in, people who agree and believe in these values and in bringing them together in one place.
I'm excited for it because, like I said, I've been on there a little bit, and yeah, it's awesome already. So thank you for building it too. And yeah, we're excited for it. Is there anything we haven't talked about, haven't asked about that you wanted to definitely cover today, either about Bloom or about your own personal journey?
I don't think so. I think that, we covered everything.
Everything.
Wow.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I'm sure there's more stories to tell somewhere, but
always. There's always.
Yeah. Well, we'll bring you back on for the 1 year update. Bloom will be international. It'll be awesome. So
thank you so much for your time and for sharing everything that you did with us.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're back. A huge thank you to Luna for reaching out, sharing your story with us, and all of the incredible work you're doing over at Bloom. We're excited to keep spreading the word and get more people to come check the app out as well.
Yeah, and more and more of our events will be showing up on Bloom as well. So the New Orleans meet and greet will be on there. Our virtual meet and greets will continue to be on there, and our West Coast tour will definitely be on there because they've launched into multiple cities in California so far. So super duper excited about that. Stay tuned for more on that from us.
And don't forget to sign up for our virtual meet and greets. There's one this week on Thursday, the 9th of December, and one on December 17th as well. And there'll be more in January. To sign up, go to our website and click on the community events tab. You'll find all of the information there. We can't wait to meet many more of you at these events.
All of you.
All of you.
We expect at some point everybody listening to this will be on the meet and greets.
Hopefully.
That's my goal.
It's a pretty ambitious goal.
And they'll be on Bloom.
Yeah, that's a pretty ambitious goal, but why not? Let's go for it.
Exactly. The other thing we want 100% participation in is...
Patreon?
Nope.
Oh. STDcheck.com.
STI testing.
STDcheck.com.
So if you're a listener to this show and if you're going out and meeting people, whether it's through Bloom, through our community, or any way that you found to meet other people in person, we highly, highly recommend getting tested for STIs so you can have informed confident conversations about your status and your sexual health, as well as the people you're meeting. The way that Emmy, you're not Emmy.
Nope.
The way that Emma and I do this is using a website called stdcheck.com. If you use the links on our website, you get to save $10, and it helps support the show financially, which we greatly appreciate. All of you who have done that, and all of you who are going to do that after listening to this.
It's super easy to find the links. They're on our website on the resources tab, also in all the show notes on your podcast player.
And the only thing easier than finding that information is getting the test done.
Super simple.
You sign up online. It's quick, it's easy, it's low cost, and you get your results in about 24 hours texted to you so you can get them from your portal. It's sweet.
Right?
And
so go check
do
it out. There's no excuse.
No excuses at all.
I'd say, actually, correction. The only excuse is if you got free STI testing somewhere else.
But even then, you might want to double check those results.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was just wanting to add that clarification because I don't blame you if you don't use the service if you get free STI tests.
We don't blame anybody for anything here.
No. Well, sometimes we blame each other. We're going just down rabbit holes.
So
here.
what we're trying to say is, in a couple of short days, we have another episode coming out.
Yes, Bryson and Michaela.
It's a fantastic conversation with two amazing humans who've actually been put in contact with us through Ryan. If you don't remember.
Remember Ryan?
He's referred half of our guests to us in the last 5 months. So definitely stick around for that one. We'll see you back here in a couple of days on Wednesday. While you're waiting, go join Bloom, find our meet and greets, and connect with other awesome people in the community.
Yeah.
I think we've talked enough. We'll continue this argument after we stop recording.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.